Now that we have our first measurements, we can start to actually get the design on Dreamweaver going. I'm going to open up Dreamweaver and let me set up a couple of things. I'm showing up my files on one side and I'm got my CSS designer on the other. Yours are probably stacked something like this, one on top of the other. You can always either collapse the files by double clicking on the Files tab, or you can click and grab the part of the bar that holds both tabs and drag it onto the side until the side turns blue, drop it, and that way you can see both columns. I have already created my assignments 1 through 3. I'm going to click on my root folder, my WeAreIDT folder, and right click and select new folder and start out with assignment 4. Press enter. Oh, I misspelled it. Press return to accept it. With that folder selected, assignment 4, I can right click and create a new file inside. And since this is 1 of 3, I'm only doing 1, but your assignment is for 3. I am typing index 01. There will be another style sheet inside, but we'll create that inside of Dreamweaver. Double clicking on index so that I can see the page. And before I get started, we're going to be using the insert tab a lot, but rather than seeing it like this, I'm going to click and hold and drag the insert tab to the top of the document that's open until I see the blue line appear. Then I'll drop it, and now my structure insert content is visible on top. I'm going to find the files again, and rather than collapsing it with the tab, I'm going to collapse it with the icon collapse, and then I'm going to click and drag from this side just to make it a little bit smaller. That way, if I click on the icon for files, I can see them again and they'll go away. If I need to see the whole tab, I can just expand it and collapse it again. So on our recipe, we have only a few items. This should be a quick exercise before we move on to the next thing. I'm going to call this assignment 4. I'll split my code in my design view. You can see now that my title has been changed to assignment 4. I'm going to need an external CSS page, so on my sources I'll click on the plus in the CSS designer, create a new CSS file. I'll browse into my assignment 4 folder. This is my root folder. I'll double click on assignment 4, and here I will add my new style sheet. I'll call it styles 01 and save it. Click OK, and now my code reveals the link. I'm going to hide my code a little bit, so I'm just in design. One thing that we can get started on is the width of the body is 770. The first selector that I add when I click plus will automatically be body. Dreamweaver just tells me that that's the only thing you have, that's the one thing you can select, so it added that selector called body. Press return to accept. My properties appear beneath it. We know that we want 770 pixels. I'm going to put this always on top so that I don't have to go back and forth. My width will be 770, so most of the items that we'll be putting in will be 770 pixels wide. I clicked on the set width area and selected pixels. I'm typing in 770. Pressing return to accept. I'm not setting a height yet because this site that we're working on is pretty tall, and we will let the content decide how tall it's going to be. Another thing that we can add to the properties on our body is to add on the margin. On the left and right, click on pixels and select auto. That's the left. On the right, same thing, auto. And you can't really tell right now, but what that's actually doing is centering the body in the middle of the page. we follow along. We set that we have a space of 45 pixels on top, and that'll be important in just a minute. We have a navigation bar, 770 by 20. So from my insert menu, and we're using only the structure tab, I'm going to find my navigation button. Navigation is this one. Looks like it's got little arrows pointing either way. Click, and it's going to ask insert navigation where. Because it's the only thing on the page, let's insert it at the insertion point. That's fine. Our navigation ID can be page nav. I'm using the camel case rule. I'm using all lowercase letters except for where I want to break the words, and I'll click OK. So my first element, and because my body is centered, my first element is now appearing on the page centered where it should be. Before I make any changes to the CSS, I'm going to continue to put items from the recipe. The next one is going to be the header. Header is 770 by 350. Our header is the one that's represented with a small header in the tab. Click to insert, and we're going to insert this after the tag that we just put in, that page nav, nav ID equals page nav. And the ID, let's call this one page header. Click OK. So now I have the two items that I wanted there, and those are pretty much the only two things that I have. There's a couple of other items that I can change, and we can do that before going back to the design to measure. Let's see, the page nav, if I click where it says page nav, I can go back into my style sheet, the CSS designer, find styles01.css, and then add a new selector. And Dreamweaver now knows this is the page nav ID that we're working on. I'll press enter to accept. My width is going to be in pixels 770, and we do have a height for this one. It's going to be 20 pixels, and the height is right below. If I click on auto and I click on pixels, I can type in 20, and you can see it moved a little bit. It's not that tall. There is that space above, and we can add that to the page nav property. If I find the margin, see how the margin tells you that outside of the element there is space. The padding is inside, the numbers are inside, the numbers are outside on margin. I'll click on the PX on the top margin, tell it that yes, I want it in pixels, I want a space of 45. Press enter, and Dreamweaver has now added a space above page nav. Next we have the page header. I'll click on the word page header, make sure my styles 1 is selected, and I click on plus to add page header. It's an ID, a new ID, press return, get the width out of the way, 770 pixels, press enter. The height of this header is 350 pixels, 350, and it's a big box. It looks too big because of the size of my screen. However, if I get the pixels back up, I can measure from top to bottom and see that I have about 350 pixels, and that is pretty much the same size as this one. It's just positioned a little bit different on the page, but it goes from the top, actually the bottom of the navigation bar, to the bottom of the original picture. Move this out of the way. And so now we have our navigation, we have our space on top, and we have the page header also defined. However, I did say that we have two parts to that header, so let me go back into the design, and while I have pixels up, I'm going to measure from the bottom of the navigation bar to the top of the bottom picture, and I have about 150 pixels to take care of. So back in Dreamweaver, if I split my code, I'll make sure that I am in the page header, and it highlights that for me. This is content for ID page header goes here. I'll select that text which is disposable. I'll press return a couple of times, and in the space in between is where I'm going to put in our two divisions that will separate the header. The division is the first icon on the structure menu. I'll click on div, and we'll accept at the insertion point, and we'll give the ID of, well, if this is page header, we'll just add page header top and click OK. I need to find manually on the source code the end of the division, press return after that, click on the insert division in the structure, insert menu again at insertion point, and we'll give this one an ID of page header bottom. I'll just put in BOT so it's not so long. Click OK. So now our two divisions are set in. Anything else that's in the recipe? Let's see. We will have a space between the header and the text that follows of 25. And since the recipe calls for that space at the bottom, I'm going to find the bottom of the page header. It's my page header here, and in my styles, page header is selected, and I'm going to add the margin at the bottom of 25 pixels. So now I'll click on design so that I can see how it's going. I see that I have the space at the top of the page nav. The page nav that's inside is only 20 pixels tall. We have a big page header that now has a space of 25 below. We can fix up the page header top and bottom so that they represent the size they're supposed to be. Let me split this again, make sure that I am selecting the page header top. And since I didn't measure them before, I can do that now. Pixels, where are you? Pixels comes up. I'm going to measure from the bottom of the navigation menu to the top, and that looks to be about 150. So I'll go back, move this out of the way for now, make sure I'm on page header top. In my styles, 1, add a selector, it's page header top, press return to accept that. I'll give it the width in pixels of 770, and the height will be the 150 that we just measured. The whole thing is 350 pixels tall, so 150 plus 200 will be 350. I'll click on page header bot and select style 1, add a new selector, make sure that I press return so it accepts the new style. In my layout, I'm going to add a width that is the same as the rest in pixels 770, and then the height in pixels will be 200, so that 200 plus 150 will make up the 350 that the header needs. By the way, this is the CSS as it's being added by Dreamweaver. I meant to just look at the code and then look at the design, and here's the beginning of our page. We are not going to be adding any photos. If you want to do that later, you can do so by all means. In the meantime, I'm just interested in the structure. In the next video, you'll see me measure the 3 columns below and then start building them. Something that you can do at this time is save, file, save. This will not save your styles. You see the asterisk is still showing. That means that it has not been saved. You can click on styles and then tell it to go and file and save, or you could publish. We can just press the file management arrows, tell it to put, say yes, and while we're at it, I'm going to go back into my files and open up the main index file. That's the one in your root folder. And for assignment 4, since there's going to be multiple entries, I'm going to find the end of assignment 4, press return, then press tab so that my unordered list moves inward, and I'll just type in site 1. You can put the name of the site if you want. I'm just going to use site 1. Highlight it. In my properties, click on my folder, find my target inside of assignment 4. It's going to be index1.html. Click OK. Hit file management again and put. Say yes to all and yes. And now my website has an assignment 4 link underneath. It says site 1. I'll click, and it doesn't look like much, but this is the beginning of the structure. In the next video, we'll start to measure the columns underneath the header and begin to code the structure in Dreamweaver as well.